where a peace officer gets his authority from. The Constitution clearly states that the authority to rule comes from the people. Agreed? All right. Starting from that premise, if you look at Article 6 of the Constitution, it will tell you that any executive or legislative elected official is required to take an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. That is absolutely required of anyone you elect. 10th Amendment states that there are powers that are reserved, there are powers that are granted to the federal government, and there are powers that are reserved to the people in the states. And those powers that are not specifically granted the federal government rest with the states. And our legal system, all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court, has constantly supported this concept. Police powers are a reserved power of the states, not of the federal government. The reason for that is because police powers are supposed to be delegated out and legislated by you, not by the feds down. So take that one step further and we'll talk about the New Mexico Constitution. In the New Mexico Constitution, the county sheriff is an elected official. Therefore, he is a constitutional officer. An interesting thing in our state is that you don't have to be a certified law enforcement officer to be elected sheriff. Now, the reason I bring all these things up is because I've had a lot of people ask me several times, does the federal government have the power to come in and tell you what to do? They don't have the power, the way I answer that is they don't have the authority to. They don't. They do have the power to sometimes if they use force. But my answer to that is it's the responsibility of the sheriff and his deputies to protect your rights ahead of everything else. Now let me say that again and put it into a concept for you. The county sheriff stands at a balance point. On one hand, we have levels of government that, because of what government is and its creation, constantly seeks more power. So the county sheriff stands at that balance between the elements of the government that want to continue to gain power and take away our liberties as citizens, and those people in the society that want to deprive you of your life, your liberty, and your property. And we have to balance those two sides. Of course we have militia. And militia is a constitutional creation and was raised to believe that our liberties were something that we fought for every day and something that we had to protect very dearly. I got into law enforcement when I was 17 years old. I became an Air Force security policeman because that was the only place I could think of where a 17-year-old could be a cop. And I took an oath at that time to protect and defend the Constitution against all invaders and anyone that would try to usurp that. That oath that I took doesn't have an expiration date on it. It's the oath I had then, it's the oath I have now. It's the oath that I'm going to have when I die. So I spent my time in the Air Force. I got out. I was a civilian cop for a while. I went back into the Army as a special agent in CID, Criminal Investigations Command. Got out and I was a deputy sheriff the rest of the time. All in all, I have about 25 years as a veteran in law enforcement with time in the military during that period. So I have an understanding of what it costs for us to be free. I have two sons, both have served in the military. It's something we've always done because we believe that liberty is something that's worth fighting for. But what's primarily important is that everybody out here believes and understands that liberty is worth fighting for. And because you're here, I know you believe that. And I thank you for that. And I'd like to stress to all of you that what I do in my job as a peace officer is to work with you in the communities to protect our rights and to protect each other. We are a team, folks. I've heard in training sometimes, I've heard some people in my profession refer to what I do as being the cow dogs or the sheep dogs. How many ranchers we got in here? Okay. You ever noticed how a cow dog works cows? It's not cooperative. It's through pain and fear. And what I see in law enforcement nowadays is a tendency sometimes to go in that direction. And that's wrong. And that's why we are not serving our communities well at all. So I'd like to start off with, does anybody here have a question that they'd like to just hit me with? Because I'm sure there's people out there that have some genuine concerns, and I'd like to be able to answer them. Come on up here and we'll say it again.
What is your position on the militarization of police?
His question was, what's my position on the militarization of police? It scares the living daylights out of me. Because whenever you have the people that have the guns and the ability to do two of the most serious powers in our republic, folks, law enforcement officers have the authority to take your liberty based on a set of standards. And they have the authority to take your life depending on a set of standards in their training. Now, what kind of people do you want doing that? You certainly do not want a group of people who are viewing you as a potential enemy. And what I have seen over the last several years is a steady attempt by certain elements, not all elements, but certain elements of law enforcement to create a divide between the people of a community and the law enforcement in that community. And we can't afford that. And even though what I'm doing is a simple little thing of running over in Lee County, the ideas that I have, you need to be willing to take back to your sheriff's department and back to your peace officers and talk to them about. And I can assure you most of them want to hear that you can support them. We do not have to, the law enforcement and the citizenry and the militia do not have to be an enemy. If you've noticed over the last, I don't know how many, probably 10 to 15 years, there's been a steady attempt on the part of most of the media outlets, and in my opinion, the federal government too, to disparage the concept of the militia. To make it seem as if it's just a group of radical people that don't know what they're doing. Well, in New Mexico, there are two types of the militia. And I'm not going to take a whole lot of Bob's time, but I just want to show you how this works with us in law enforcement. The militia in the state of New Mexico is broke up into the organized and the unorganized. And the unorganized is every able-bodied male between the age of 18 and 45. The militia is a constitutional creation, and it has every right to exist. It is a tool within our communities in time of invasion, in type of emergency, and it is a tool that is supposed to work with your local peace officers and is supposed to work with your law enforcement. We are not opposites to each other. We should be two parts of a team that when it's necessary we can work together very well. But there's a constant attempt on some parts of my profession to damage that relationship. I fight that. So as far as my opinion on the militarization of police, we can't afford it. If at any time the police begin to think that they have the authority to determine for you what your rules and your laws will be that you will live in, we're in the wrong state, folks. We'll be in a police state, I guarantee you. Anybody have another question?